The first chapter to the ending of the petrodollar has started. It will be shocking for the average American. Middle class will lose the status of middle class. There will be no middle class. Let's start with that. Heat, electricity, everything subsidized by the government will triple overnight, and it'll only get worse even if you can get the services.
Greetings, and thank you for joining us at soundmoneycampaign.com. Today, we have one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our time, Marin Katusa, the Chief Energy Strategist for Casey Research. Marin, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Marin, let's start off with some current news. What does the current crisis in Russia mean for the US dollar and oil?
Well, you just nailed the two main issues exactly revolving around it. Number one, how is this going to affect the petrodollar? And number two, countries like Germany. What people don't realize is Germany is the main consumer of energy in Europe from Russia. They're also the major economy of the EU 27, which is the largest economy combined in the world. So people can say in the West whatever they want about the Russians, and that's opinion. The fact is, without the Russian oil and gas and uranium, the EU 27 cannot function. They cannot keep warm. They can't keep their factories going. Now, where this becomes really interesting is, how does this affect the U.S.? Well, the U.S. is talking about putting sanctions on the Russians, but this is not the same Russia of 20 years ago when Bill Clinton could do whatever he wanted with Yeltsin. This is a very different situation. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia now, understands, and he's built up a country that is so wealthy. They have such reserves, and it'd be interesting to see what Russia now does with Iran, what they do with India, China, Saudi Arabia, the other countries. So the interesting fact is, yes, the petrodollar, the first chapter to the ending of the petrodollar has started. This is the most exciting story going on in the world right now.
Marin, today's headline on CNBC reads, "Copper collapses most since December 2011 on China credit fears." Fear and panic selling is what most investors feel and do. What's your first thoughts when you read a headline like that?
What's the position of the firm writing it? Are they short? Are they long? Look, you got to be very careful reading mainstream media. You know, if it's on the front page of the newspaper, that trade is already too late. You've missed it. You want to invest in the things that nobody is talking about, the contrarian investments. That's how you make a lot of money. You want to back the right people. Ignore the noise, ignore the front page. That's entertainment. By the time it's on the front page, the guys who've made money from that trade have already made their money, and they're already on, the smart money is on the trade that is not yet on the first page, but it's on the 16th page in small print on the back of the newspaper that nobody's reading, and then they're going to sell it when it's on the front page. So keep that in mind.
So, what is on page 16 of the newspapers you and your partners read? What are you buying right now?
Our big player right now is a company called Brazil Resources, which has a fantastic management team that own over 25% of the stock. They have personally written millions of dollars into the company, into financings, and I believe that this story is just in the beginning of a major, major run. I'd already, it's interesting when you ask that question, because there's companies right now that are exploration projects that are trading at the same market cap, that are getting major bought deals, and yet BRI, the Brazil Resource Corp, has 4 million ounces of gold and a very similar exploration project in the Athabasca Basin to these other companies that have a $70 million market cap with similar projects, and you get the 4 million ounces of gold for free. That's called value investing in the junior resource market.
You said gold company, so is this a gold property you're talking about, or uranium?
Well, it's actually serendipity took over. Right now, there's only 3 management teams in Canada, in the Athabasca Basin, that have uranium production currently. That's Cameco, that's Canada's largest uranium producer. There's Areva, which is France's largest uranium producer. It's pretty much like a national company. And then there's BRI, because of Amir Adani. All the other companies are just explorers. The interesting part is Amir put together this fantastic set of assets in Brazil. By serendipity, he took over a company that had this asset that management didn't understand what it was. And it was kind of lucky from a mere standpoint, but major luck. Because of his experience in uranium, he saw the value of this project. That project alone has a joint venture with one of the world's largest uranium-producing companies. That's called Areva. I sit back and I'm in awe because just off of the gold assets, they are undervalued on the 4 million ounces of gold. Now, if you take that uranium asset that they have and Amir's management team and the joint venture with Areva, they're getting zero value for that. But similar companies in that western portion basin of the Athabasca Basin have a $70 million market cap. That's what BRI is trading at right now with 4 million ounces of gold. This story is only going to get bigger and better, and the stock price is going higher. Personally, I think this is going to be a $5 stock in 5 years.
I'm trying to get an idea of what America will look like after it loses the world reserve currency status. As someone who's traveled to over 100 countries, what are you thinking?
It will be shocking for the average American. Middle class will lose the status of middle class. There will be no middle class. Let's start with that. If the petrodollar dies and the U.S. lose their reserve currency status of the world, there will be no middle class. There will always be the rich. Whichever country, whether you go anywhere in Africa or even at the lows in Russia, the oligarchs emerged, there will always be that top 1% who are smart enough to figure out, hey, let's make sure we own gold and silver and have our fingers in the right assets that the society needs. Now, the middle class and the low class, wow, what a game changer. Your cost of living will quadruple. And let's just take countries in the euro, for example. Imagine this. Take a country like Croatia, which is the most recent entrant into the EU. They're the 27th member of the EU. The average worker with a university degree in Croatia, let's take a nice summer resort area like Zadar, makes about 1,200 euros a month. He spends a third of that after tax on keeping his house warm or his apartment warm and filling up his gas tank to get to work and get back to work. Okay? In North America, we don't make $1,200 a month, and we don't spend a third of our paycheck on keeping our house warm and driving to work. And they haven't even lost status yet. The euro is also going to be affected. So the cost of living, food will triple. Heat, electricity, everything subsidized by the government will triple overnight, and it'll only get worse, even if you can get the services. For the average citizen, they should be thinking, okay, I should store some gold here and there as insurance to all this. Now, I don't know when it will happen, but it will happen because all currencies have happened. I don't think the people in Rome thought that Rome would ever fall as an empire, but it did. So you have to be prepared and protect your family. And that's why you want leverage to things that have major upside when the dollar does collapse. It's called insurance. And the best insurance for that is gold.
Is there anyone that is high up in political office that you've spoken with that is concerned about a dollar crisis?
Well, even at the Casey conference, which is on videotape, we have it on the DVDs, Ron Paul was talking about exactly what you're bringing up. So even within recognized, established American politicians are talking about it. There's been many discussions within even Russia and the Middle East. Even China has mentioned the issues. So the question is what will start the domino effect for the fall of the petrodollar? And I believe that the world is now fed up with the false threats of Obama, and we'll see what's going on right now with the Ukraine. And I must emphasize to all your viewers, do not underestimate Putin and do not underestimate the power of energy and Russia.
What about the fact that the US dollar is essentially backed by thousands of nuclear warheads and 700 military bases?
The Russians have more nuclear warheads, so let's negate that. The Russians are working towards their issues. Europe depends on Russia to keep its lights on. My wife had dinner with Hillary Clinton the other night in Vancouver. She came to give her talk, and I found one comment that my wife said that Hillary said that the U.S. and Canada should work together to export energy to Europe. Yeah, in theory, that makes sense. That's political lip service. First of all, you'd have to change the legislation in the U.S. You can't export oil. out of the U.S. Secondly, you got to build the pipelines. Look how the Keystone XL has been going. Because everybody wants a comment. You know, you got to get the First Nations approval in Canada. You got to get the environmentalists. You got to get the governments. All of the special situations. The reality is, it's going to be 20 years before the infrastructure is built in North America to be able to export and feed the Europeans. It's not going to happen. The infrastructure is already built in Europe to take Russian energy. So I think a big key here is, you know, Russia really showed the true strength of Obama's administration in Syria. And we see yet again the Olympics, how they presented. And within a day of the closing of the Olympics, Russia made a move in the Ukraine. And what has the West done? There's nothing they can do.
Marin, in closing, what is a good book you can recommend to our listeners?
Well, I love Doug Casey's writings. I think he's just a genius of modern times. You're listening to a modern-day independent thinker. I love listening to Rick Rule at conferences when it comes to investing. But I think a couple of books that I enjoyed when I was younger, back 15 years ago, I stumbled across one book that is a very easy read, and I think it's a must-read. And I always have a box in my office, and when people come in and I find someone who might appreciate it, I give it to them. It's a cheap book. It's like $9-10. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. Now, it's a funny book because people will be like, what? Why is Marin recommending this? It comes to the core of investing. And it talks about, it's the simple things that make you really rich. Discipline, show up to work. And it's the patterns to success. And this 100-page book will not just enlighten you and motivate you, but it gives you 10 rules, the 10 commandments of being a successful investor. And I think that's a great book. Now, look, all of the stuff Warren Buffett writes, The Intelligent Investor is a must-read. And I also hope you put my stuff on this list, the Casey Energy Report, because we've had a track record for the last 8 years that I've beaten our indexes, not just every quarter for 8 years, but every year for 8 years. So I'm quite proud of our track record, and we work hard on that. So I hope that people enjoy the Casey Energy Report.
Thank you for joining us today at soundmoneycampaign.com.